All right, we're all here and ready to go. I will do a very quick introduction and then hand over to Jasper, our community advocate, to host the first half of this call. So the purpose of this call today, we obviously have some special guests here to talk about DeFi, and we will go through the bi-weekly update in the second half of the call. Langers will join us a bit later on. For all things Chapala related, there is a call in about 19 or so hours tomorrow that is hosted by ETH Staker. Nothing really to do with Rocket Pool, but that's where we're kind of sending people for Chapala related celebrations. And then just under 24 hours after that, there will be the second of our two planned Atlas town halls. So for all your Atlas questions, we'll try to address them then. We will try to run it on Twitter Spaces. Last time didn't have the best of luck. We had to go to Discord. Fingers crossed so we can make this more of kind of a public affair. We can answer anyone's questions about Atlas. But while a lot of the focus might be on the kind of node operator side, we realize that for Rocket Pool, there's two parts of the protocol, of course. Node operators make it possible to have liquid staking deposits, and then the liquid staking deposits enable node operators to run more mini pools. So a big part of what makes Rocket Pool successful is having opportunities to use rETH in DeFi, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'll pass over to Jasper, and he can start off with the introductions, and then later on we'll get Langers on, as I said, to do the bi-weekly. Jasper, over to you.
Thank you, Nick, for that lovely introduction. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. First half of this call, as Nick mentioned, will be focused on sommelier. Please actually correct me on the pronunciation before I butcher it for the entire call. How do you like to pronounce it? Sommelier?
Sommelier works.
Sommelier finance, which I personally am very excited for, given their products will be dealing with some pretty interesting DeFi topics that I myself am interested on as I serve on the incentives incentives management committee for Rocket Pool. So we will have some pretty interesting discussions ahead of us. Before we get to that point, though, can you just tell me what is Sommelier Finance, and just generally introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'll kick us off. So my name's Josh Kessler. I'm the head of growth at Sommelier. And Sommelier, like the super short elevator pitch, is like a next generation Yearn. The key difference is that our vaults are a little more intelligent and dynamic. So what does that mean? It means that they're able to predict, respond, optimize, and evolve in ways that a Yearn vault is not. So it could be using time series forecasting to predict future base yields. It could be handling complex positions like a Uniswap v3 liquidity position. It could be running sophisticated optimizations, and then integrating with new protocols and tokens to chase yield opportunities. And so the key thing that is enabling that is the Sommelier blockchain, which is built on the Cosmos SDK. And that blockchain allows off-chain computation to be brought on-chain in a decentralized way. So that off-chain computation piece is what makes the vaults intelligent. As an Ethereum user, you would never know that Cosmos blockchain is powering this in the back end because your experience is completely native. You stay on Ethereum. When you interact with the smart contract, you're depositing on Ethereum. You're not dealing with any bridged assets. Like all the smart contract and on-chain execution work is happening in Ethereum land. So that's the quick pitch on Sommelier, but I'll let Steven and Sun introduce themselves and their respective organizations.
Hey there, I'm Sun. I am co-founder of a company called 7Cs. So Sommelier is a strategy execution platform. It's a platform for deploying, as Josh mentioned, like dynamic intelligent vaults, and we can get more into how that works, like the underlying mechanism. But there's also this concept of a strategist in sommelier. So that's the kind of entity that's responsible for running that sophisticated off-chain optimization, right? It's the entity that's responsible for determining what optimal rebalances to make and actually getting that executed on the Vault smart contract. So 7Cs is one such entity. Stephen, I'll let Stephen introduce himself, but Stephen's also a strategist, and we're excited to talk about this product that we're launching tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Steven. Some of you might know me as like the calculator guy from YouTube and Twitter. But for the sake of this call, I am the CEO of Define Logic Labs, which is a data analysis company or data analyst company that works directly with 7Cs on this particular strategy. If you hear any yelling in the background, that is my 3-year-old son who's not sleeping right now, even though he should. So basically, when we conceived this vault idea, we thought we were looking at how can we make an index of the best ETH yields in DeFi that are risk adjusted and consistent in a way that they are yield weighted. So if one of the yields starts to go down, or if the TVL is so high that yield is no longer viable, that it switches to putting more funds into other yields in a way that makes it scalable. So when we launch initially, we'll be basically using UniV3 tick optimization as well as leveraged stake ETH or leveraged LSTs, which are liquid stake tokens, also known as LSDs by other name, and it will only go from there. So we're really excited to talk about this.
Awesome. Thank you all for those introductions. And I think what resonated with me throughout all of that was the urine metaphor. So whereas urine is sort of like this proto DeFi 2019, 2020 era simple compounding platform where you have managers who create strategies which are really like deposit into A, collect B, compound, like really straightforward, simple stuff. Now we've sort of had to push the envelope a little bit. And so it seems to, if I'm understanding this all correctly, that Sommelier Finance, through the Cosmos SDK chain, has created almost like a data availability compute layer for executing these strategies that 7Cs and Define, you guys, bring to the table. And we'll be jumping into specifically the ETH-based strategies in a moment. But I just want to say if that's right, and if I'm projecting that right correctly to the listeners.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Josh.
No, go ahead, son. It's fine.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of describing it. It's the kind of urine model, which has been largely adopted in DeFi, is that when you have a strategy, you code that in a smart contract, and then it goes and lives autonomously, right? The upside of that is like, one, there's very low like management operational costs, right? There's also a benefit in terms of transparency and security, right? Like you can see literally every possible condition that the strategy accounts for in the smart contract, and that exactly how it's going to behave. The downside is that in like an efficient market, strategies that are, first of all, very simple because they have to be coded on chain, number one, and number two, fully public in the sense of you can 100% predict their future behavior, are just not going to remain viable for very long, right? And we already see that with urine strategies in that those yields dry up very quickly, right? Maybe they last a month, maybe 2 months, but eventually yields dry up. Sommelier is very much built with this problem in mind of how do you develop vaults that, one, are very easy to use, right, in the way that urine-like vaults are, but two, are also built for longevity, right, that can adapt to new market conditions, that can adapt to new asset opportunities and new yield opportunities as they arise.
Sweet. Let's jump into some of those opportunities as it pertains to the real yield ETH vault that you guys are soon to be launching. And as I understand it, the two major strategies that are going to underpin this are Uniswap v3, a concentrated liquidity, and leverage staking. So let's just broadly break those down before we dive into exactly how you guys will be using that. Starting with Uni v3. So concentrated liquidity is somewhat of a riskier form of liquidity provision in like V2 era liquidity, you would have impermanent loss. However, prices would have to diverge pretty substantially for the impermanent loss to really hurt the user. Whereas in concentrated liquidity, you can really hone in the ranges and amplify, almost leverage your liquidity provision into tiny ranges. That's especially useful for liquid staked tokens because they trade ideally in very tight bands. And post Chapella, in theory, they should trade in incredibly tight bands. So, is there anything you want to explain about how Sommelier and how you guys view concentrated liquidity?
So, little history about Sommelier, which is somewhat interesting and relevant, is that Sommelier actually originated as a Uniswap v3 liquidity management platform. Like the original vision for Sommelier was to like make LPing Uniswap v3 very accessible and easy for the general public. Now, the kind of thing that like we all who were involved in the Sommelier ecosystem discovered early on, which now is obvious, but back in the day this wasn't clear, is that liquidity providing for non-stable pairs, and by stable I mean non-correlated pairs that are expected to mean revert, liquidity providing for non-stable pairs is generally a losing game, right? Especially in
It's
crypto.
so toxic.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different words to describe the phenomena where LPers get eaten alive. Impermanent loss was the predominant one. There's adverse, like adverse and toxic flow. Now there's this new thing called like loss versus rebalancing. But the core reason is very simple, which is that the way the AMM algorithm works is that when volatility is really high and prices diverge from where you're quoting, you're always left holding the less valuable asset, right? So in general, it's a losing game. Now, the saving grace here, and this is the reason that real yield USD is very successful, and we can get into what that is, and the reason why we think real yield ETH will be successful is that stablecoin pairs and ETH and liquid staking token pairs do have this property that you can actually, number one, they're mean reverting in a sense, right? Like they're highly correlated pairs. There is going to be some volatility, but we don't expect this case where, price skyrockets for one of these assets, short of like some weird vulnerability or some interesting market events. So given that property, there actually are ways you can be profitable LPing Uniswap v3, LPing on Uniswap v3. And Real Yield USD is kind of a demonstration of this. That vault is actually a top 5 LPer in the USDC USDT 1 basis point pool, which is a very competitive pool, and we're expecting to be very competitive in LPing Rocket Pool ETH as well as other liquid staking token pairs on Uniswap v3.
Can you talk a little bit about how your V3 strategy actually executes? Is it a constant rebalancing, or is it automated, or is it very manual?
So this is a great question, question that we get a lot. It's essentially 90% automated, and that 10% is to account for like radical market events like the USDC DPEG, right? As a general policy, right, like just high level, when crazy stuff is happening in the market, you don't want to be quoting on as an LP or a market maker or whatever, right? So it's not feasible to essentially encode all the possible ways markets can get weird, right? Where you just have to stop quoting. So that's where the 10% is, but 90% of it is automated. We have this system that essentially does this tick range optimization. It's been fairly successful. And we're hoping to, again, bring that battle-tested system that's been tested in the USDC, USDT pairs to the liquid staking derivative markets.
A couple of bonus questions on this. One, is there any interest in sort of taking advantage of yield opportunities that are built on top of V3? Like, is Sommelier capable of, say, Rocket Pool was to incentivize V3 managers, of using that as like an additional layer on top? And second, I actually don't remember the second, just feel free to take the first.
That sounds really, really interesting, and like I think we'd love to know more. Basically, the answer is yes. And Josh can elaborate here as well. But the way that sommelier vaults are built is that through a governance process, those vaults can actually extend the capabilities that they currently have. So to start, this product we're launching tomorrow, Real Yield ETH, can essentially take positions on Aave, Compound, and Uniswap v3, just vanilla, right? But you know we do have this option of like extending that capability through building, like we call these adapters. They're smart contract adapters that let the vault interact with other protocols. We could essentially build an adapter for any arbitrary protocol and let Real Yield ETH take positions there, given conditional on governance support, obviously. So that sounds really interesting. Would love to know more about that.
Yeah, sweet. We on the incentive management committee think that Uniswap v3 is going to be pivotal in liquidity management for LSTs moving forward, and expect that incentivizing these LPs will pay huge returns. So, well, not returns, will be very cost effective for protocols looking to increase liquidity. So we will be experimenting with that. And the second question I had for you is, are you aware of or capable or familiar with the idea of leveraging Uniswap v3 LPs themselves?
I can sort of jump in there for a second here because it's kind of already possible. So right now, Real Yield USD is it's a vault, and as such, it's composable. It's already being used on platforms like DMEX as collateral. So there is a reality in which other vaults similar to Real Yield USD, potentially like Real Yield ETH, could be, because they will be composable, could be used as collateral and therefore leveraged if the user decided to go that route. In that similar way.
Got it. Awesome. So I think that wraps up my Uni v3 questions. Moving on to the other half of what this vault will include is leverage staking. So broadly speaking, leverage staking is taking an LST, borrowing ETH against it, and staking that ETH, and repeating the process. So do you want to give me how Sommelier approaches this broad concept?
Sure. So there are many approaches to leverage staking. Many of them use different mechanisms. I mean, you have your Oasis, you have your Gearbox, you have Instadapp, for example. Many of them use flash loans. So what we do is a little bit different. Because leverage staking is only a portion of the strategy, we have the ability to leverage without using a flash loan and without actually looping in a one transaction step, which is really, really cost effective and efficient. And by doing that, we can then send whatever capital is left after doing that into the other strategies within the vault. So if you're looking for like a broader understanding of leverage staking, like the basic idea is you take an LST and you collateralize it. And traditionally what you would do is you would borrow the primitive version of that. So if you're using Rocket Pool ETH, for example, you would collateralize rETH, you would borrow ETH, you'd convert that to rETH, add that as collateral, and then repeat that process over and over again until you were leveraged to your heart's content. Now, with things like Aave v3 or Compound, that gets really interesting because of the drastically high LTVs available. But of course, with like more conservative leverage, you might be looking at Aave v2 and some other protocols. Leverage ranging between 3.5x and 9x up to, I think, 10x if you look at a protocol like Gearbox.
Yeah, and I believe also the Aave mode gets you around 10x. Around what leverage factor does Sommelier usually tend to stay at, and around what health factor as well?
That's a great question. So our health factor stays at or above 1.05, which gives us plenty of room to rebalance if need be, if there's some sort of dramatic event where one of these LSTs depegs for whatever reason. Of course, we've seen like cbETH take a couple point hits before. We've seen even sETH depeg briefly. So
we all remember
being able to have that
collapse.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So being able to take a bit of a buffer there is really important. And our current leverage we're targeting is 3.5x on our first iteration. But as we continue to develop adapters, those will probably, and as we test this, as this vault continues to progress, we will, of course, see what other leverage we want to work with.
Has there been any consideration towards fixed term leverage platforms? I would like microfinance, I believe, where you have no liquidation risk, essentially.
So I'm not familiar with that specific platform, but one of the considerations to have is that each of these platform integrations has to have adapters for it built into the contracts for the vault. So it's not like we're actively managing any of these assets. The assets are managed by smart contracts, and because of that, each adapter is very specific. It has to go through an audit process, and unfortunately, even though I would love to just have adapters for every single protocol and be able to move the assets around, willy-nilly as needed, we have to be very, very careful about which protocols we use, which ones we're building adapters for, and so I'll certainly look into it. I'm sure the team will, but for the time being, we're looking at your general quote unquote blue chip protocols with the best risk adjusted returns and things that we can use immediately with a high level of confidence.
And just to kind of elaborate on that point a bit, I think one key consideration is definitely smart contract team bandwidth, right? Like we very much have to prioritize, as Stephen mentioned, like what protocols we're actually building adapters for. Another aspect is like a design consideration from a strategy perspective, right? So Real Yield USD was built with like a risk adjusted return preference first, right? Like blue chip stablecoins, blue chip protocols, nothing too exotic. The same is true for Real Yield ETH, right? We really are trying to target the best, high quality organic ETH denominated returns on Ethereum mainnet. So this particular product, it doesn't make as much sense to target like some more exotic DeFi protocols. But Somalia as a platform, of course, is agnostic to this, right? Like the sky's the limit. Whatever smart contract integrations are available, Somalia can make use of those, and it's open. Strategists can come and build all kinds of interesting strategies. There really are no limitations there.
Is the ability to make strategies permissionless, or do you have to be part of the team to generate these?
It is. Go ahead, Josh. I'll let you take that.
Okay. Yeah. So every strategy that is available on the Somalia platform is approved via community governance. So that is the one potential gating item, but that process, going through that process is open to anybody. So that would require you to make a forum post on the community forum that would sit for 3 days for discussion and review. Typically, that post says something to the effect of, hey, this is who I am, or this is who the team is. These are our qualifications. This is the vault that we would like to launch on the platform. There may be back testing performance. There's a general overview of like the protocols that the vault's going to interact with, generally how it's going to function. Like, hey, it's going to do lending here. It's going to get some leverage from this other protocol. So just basically a post making the case to the Somalia community about why this vault should be onboarded. So once it goes on the governance forum, then it is available for vote over a 2-day period. And again, the SOM token holders, which is effectively like, Somalia community stakeholders, are then voting whether or not to accept that strategy to the platform. So can you just roll out of bed and start your strategy, the same day? No. But if you go through that governance process, like it is open to everybody.
That's a very nice system. I'm a big fan of that. And speaking of this cautionary approach towards onboarding, can you talk a bit about the security and steps you and your individual teams have taken towards ensuring the security of user funds? Specifically, I'm curious about audits, and also since this is off-chain compute, what trust assumptions, if any, are made there?
I can touch on audits really quick. So all the smart contracts that are part of the Sommelier architecture have been audited by independent third party. Our auditor is Macro. We've developed a really deep relationship with them. They're very familiar with our architecture and just some of the stuff we've been doing. So we think very highly of them. They also audit Maker and Frax and other high quality projects. So yeah, all our audits are available on our website as well if anyone's interested. But like as a general point, Sommelier is very focused on security, and like if you like tick through the architecture, that becomes very apparent. So, you have the Sommelier validator set, um, reaching consensus on some of these rebalances where in other apps, maybe they're running this through like a multi-sig. So just a little more decentralized from that perspective. The, you know, um, the validator set can only take certain actions on the smart contract. So it's just like a very robust system from end to end from a security perspective. And then, Sun, maybe you'll take the second half of the question.
Sure. So I think it's probably a good point to just do like a very quick whirlwind tour of like what the Sommelier architecture is. The whole point of the Sommelier system is to essentially address this question of if you have a strategist that can do arbitrary off-chain computation to make rebalance decisions, how do you avoid like that strategist misbehaving, right? How do you make sure this is decentralized and make sure we preserve all the benefits of DeFi, right? That's the core design question of Sommelier. And so the architecture is basically, as follows. We have the strategists, 7Cs, Define Logic Labs, are two such strategists that are sitting off chain, running whatever models they have to run to make their rebalance decisions. When a decision is made, let's say it's to, swap USDC for USDT, something simple, right? That rebalance decision is submitted to the Sommelier validator set, which is, again, Sommelier is a Cosmos blockchain. There's a set of independent validators who are running consensus on that chain. They receive the rebalance instruction from the strategists. Then the validators come to consensus. If consensus is achieved, they submit that instruction to the smart contract to be executed. So strategists don't actually have direct control over the smart contract. The Sommelier blockchain exists as this intermediary between strategists and the vault. So like, what's the point of this, right? Number one, right, I think a good example of why this is useful is what happens if the strategist just disappears, right? Not necessarily maliciously, they just fall off the face of the earth for whatever reason. What validators can do then is essentially move funds from, whatever positions they're currently in into like a safe position, shut down the vault, and let users withdraw whenever they want, right? The same is true for like a malicious strategist, right? Validators at any given time can sever that connection from strategist to the vault. So, validators exist as this like incentive aligned party that serves as a check to strategists. And, Sommelier more broadly is this very sophisticated system of different, checks and balances and parties that are meant to be replaceable, right? That's ultimately the goal. It's that any party, whether it's a strategist or any individual validator from the validator set, can go rogue or can go missing, and the system still continues because someone else can take their place. So that's high-level architecture. Now security, right? There's two layers of security in the architecture. Number one, as I just described, is the validator set. So strategists can only do what Sommelier validators allow them to do. That's the first layer. The second layer is actually the smart contract itself, right? So let's say that, the smart contract is, let's talk about real deal USD. That strategy, that smart contract essentially only allows the strategist, which for that strategy is 7Cs, to essentially swap between DAI USDC USDT and take positions on Aave, Compound, and Uniswap v3. So like the space of ways that a strategist can misbehave is also constrained by what that immutable smart contract allows for, right? So this is kind of like the two-layer approach to security in Sommelier. We think that we're striking the right balance here between flexibility to have interesting strategies, but also security for users, which is, again, of the utmost importance at the end of the day.
That is a very cool system. way to leverage the Cosmos SDK. I'm curious, are the validators incentive aligned to make sure that the updates they receive are not deleterious to the vault depositors? Like what makes them incentive aligned not to allow a strategist to drain the vault?
Yeah, this is a great question. So Somalia, and we can get more into like the role of the utility of the SOM token in the ecosystem, but SOM token stakers, right, who stake with validators, are incentivized for providing that security by fees from the vault, right? And those fees are typically performance fees and platform fees or like management fees. And so the way that validators, like the economic model for how validators make money is if users make money, right? Because they're receiving a percentage of the profits that users receive. So, a strategist that's doing things to only benefit themselves at the expense of users is equally hurting validators. And therefore, validators are incentive aligned to like prevent that behavior, right? Like the state of the system where everyone is happiest is where users are making a lot of money because strategies are doing well, validators are making money, and the strategists are making money from that performance.
I have just a couple more questions. One, can you describe briefly what the fee structure is for the real yield ETH vault? And two, is the Sommelier blockchain permissionless to join? As I understand it, Cosmos generally is. So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so anyone can be a staker.
Good.
Oh, just on the staking point, anyone can join the Sommelier blockchain, participate in governance or staking.
And then from the fee perspective, it is similar to other maybe more traditional investments, where it's similar to a 2 and 20 model, where there will be like roughly a 2% platform fee and then a 20% performance fee. And I think Sun can talk more on this, but the platform fee is not an upfront fee, so you're not going to get a deposit fee. You're not going to enter in at a 2% loss. That's going to be over time. And Sun, actually, I'll let you talk on more on that because you understand the mechanism a little bit better than I do.
Yeah, so as Stephen mentioned, there's like a 2% platform fee and a 20% performance fee on real yield ETH. One thing I'll say is that the fee structure is determined by the strategist at launch, right? So what we're describing is specific to real yield ETH. Other strategies might have different parameters. But those fees, that 2 and 20, are not collected upfront. They're essentially collected continually over time in an annualized way, right? So there is a 0% fee to deposit and withdraw. If you deposit to the vault and withdraw from the vault a year later, that's when you will see that full 2% management / platform and 20% performance. But again, it's being collected continually over time.
And where do these fees go? Do they go all to the staker validator set, or is there also a protocol DAO?
So there is a split between, so fees essentially go to the strategists and the stakers. Now, what that actual split is, another thing that's determined by the strategist at deployment, right? These are like all of these fee structure, the splits of the platform are all parameters that governance considers when they decide whether to vote to accept a vault or not. But that split is for real yield ETH, 25% of all fees go to the protocol. Again, all fees being that 2 and 20, and the other 75 are going to the strategists, which are 7Cs and Define Logic.
Got it. Thank you. And I think for my final question of this call is why you guys think rETH is useful to include in the vault. Obviously, rETH positions itself to try to be the most decentralized LST primarily, but also recently it's had quite a bit of DeFi adoption. So could you talk just briefly a bit about what you see as the future of rETH in the vault? And then perhaps some closing thoughts about Sommelier and the Rocket Pool.
Sure, I'll kick it off, and I'm sure Stephen and Josh have thoughts on this as well. First of all, like I'm personally a huge fan of Rocket Pool and like what it is for DeFi. Like a properly decentralized staking provider is like, essential for all the reasons I'm preaching to the choir here. So we're, first of all, personally very big fans of the project. And as you mentioned, there is like growing utility in Rocket Pool. I know there's a bunch of initiatives. Recently, right, the thing that actually enabled us to include this in the vault was getting a Chainlink Oracle, right? There's all
Oh
sorts
man,
of
what a time. That thing took years.
yeah, but here we are. Great timing. I mean, it coincided with us developing this vault. So that, in addition to like reducing the like kind of requirements for setting up your own validator on the network, it feels like it's a really good time in the ecosystem. There's a ton of exciting stuff happening, and we very much want to be positioned to capitalize on the increased utility, increased integrations of Rocket Pool ETH. So, TLDR, we're very excited about the project. We're very optimistic about adoption and usage, and we very much want to be positioned to capitalize on that.
Yeah, absolutely. To continue on that, what we do is, again, it's a yield-weighted index of ETH strategies. And so even agnostic to the ethos of Rocket Pool is the fact that these LSTs have different performance over time. So I believe it was just a few days ago where our ETH was as high as like 6% annualized staking yield. So at that moment, that was certainly the best yield in class. And so as those things sort of shift and change over time, certainly yields will sort of, or the index will weight itself accordingly. And as we've seen, our ETH is certainly a top competitor in this field, and we're looking forward to the future. Like one of the key ideas behind this vault is longevity, right? We're not a singular vault with a fixed strategy that will eventually get diluted and be uncompetitive. We're looking to be the best-in-class vault in perpetuity. And we think that our ETH's integrations and composability throughout DeFi is here to stay and is here to expand. And so looking forward into the future, our ETH is a clear choice.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. I'm really excited to see the future of Sommelier and Rocket Pool. This vault will certainly, I think, do well based on the fact that the leverage staking and Uniswap V3 are going to be highly performative plays going into Chapella and the years ahead. These are definitely sustainable strategies. And I think the focus on decentralization that you bring through using the Cosmos SDK to create this very nice incentive structure, it seems, towards creating strategists that sustainably build good vaults is reflected in the ethos of Rocket Pool, trying to create a robust network of node operators that are here for the long term through properly aligned incentives. So thank you again for joining us. As we transition into the second half of this call, we will be discussing our bi-weekly update. So you guys are free to stick around and chat through that. But otherwise, I'll be handing it back over to Mav.
Thank you for having us. Love what you guys are building.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, guys. I think that made for a great first half of our Twitter space. I've just tagged Langers, so hopefully he's not too far away, and then we can get into this bi-weekly update. A lot to go through again this time. Maybe while we're waiting for him to make his way over to the Twitter space, we can start with some of the numbers, which have been pretty impressive. So the rETH supply has grown by 7.1% over the past 2 weeks, and at an annualized growth rate that is 185%. So certainly pretty good numbers. It remains to be seen.
Maybe we should talk about that one a little bit. Why do you think that happened?
I can think of one reason, but exactly on that point, it remains to be seen how that trend will continue. Right? Obviously, we have Chapella, we have Atlas, and we did have the event that contributed a lot towards that, which is the increasing of the deposit pool limit. So we have that a little bit later on under the R&D section, but I guess it probably makes sense to talk about that now.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, like this idea of latent rETH demand. And if you noticed in the Discord, the IMC has actually been actively talking about it and trying to just sort of grok roughly how much there is out there, so we can figure out how much we should incentivize. This is going into uh, Atlas pretty much. And the major data point that you've been alluding to is this event where the Rocket Pool team, increased the deposit pool cap by 13,000 ETH to 18,000. And within, I believe it was 11 hours, the entire capacity was just filled up. And since then, we've had brief periods of time where the deposit pool has been open again, but we are far from seeing the deposit pool empty. And so we have very little data besides that. We know that 11 hours we can absorb 13,000 ETH. We have very little data beyond that. So it's going to be so interesting to see what happens going into Chapella, where, for example, we had one EOA that had 4,500 ETH sitting cold, then all of a sudden decides to mint rETH. Like, we have no idea how many people like that are out there who have just been waiting for the deposit pool to be open again, since it's been perpetually closed now since, I believe, the merge. So what are your thoughts on this idea of the latent rETH demand?
I think that the mindset shift is going to be very interesting because, as you point out, anyone who's kind of remotely plugged into the world of liquid staking, or at least Rocket Pool, probably defaults to the fact that, you can't get rETH, right? Or at least you can't mint it.
Right.
So shifting that to the default being that you can obtain rETH easily by minting it, the flow-on effects to integrations with the likes of MetaMask and the incredible reach that they have, but we haven't really been able to capitalize on it yet. And similarly, upcoming integrations of a similar nature that will probably be perhaps timed a little bit better to capitalize on the fact that once there are announcements out, once people can go and have a bit of a click around and interact with Rocket Pool, the default is, yes, you can get rETH. There is a lot of capacity to mint additional liquid staking tokens. So it may not be an instant shift. There will certainly be that amount of, as you say, latent demand that exists right now and is ready to go. But I think at the same time, there's going to be a much longer process of re-education, I suppose, to the fact that rETH is now, as a default setting, an option. And it is a bit of a question mark. I mean, what kind of grounds do you have to make an estimate? We saw how quickly it filled up, but there's no guarantee that will continue. I'm going to be watching very intently. It's a big week or two, and yeah, it's going to have even more. The importance of DeFi integrations with Rocket Pool is going to become even more important.
I will definitely be paying attention to that total rETH amount going into the Atlas upgrade, because for every LEB8 conversion, we pull, I believe, 32 ETH from the deposit tool. Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Sorry.
Yeah, 30. So every 16 ETH pool that's converted to two LEB8, each one pulls 32 ETH out of the deposit pool. So our current 13,000 or 18,000 ETH deposit pool is actually not that many conversions. We could, I believe, our current mini pool capacity is enough to empty the deposit pool like 2.5 times over.
So
we can handle 562 conversions from 16 ETH pools to LEB8s. That is not a lot. That is going to very quickly decimate the deposit pool and hopefully create a lot of room for, as you said, the MetaMask upgrade or integration came in a really weird time. And for a while, I actually had a bounty. If anyone was able to use MetaMask to mint rETH, I was going to give them 5 RPL, but no one could do it because the pool was just filled. There have been actually some MetaMask mints of rETH recently, though. The pool was open. Yep, perhaps we should jump into the smart node.
Yep, let's do it.
Or should we yeah. So this is the last bi-weekly update before Atlas goes live. How did that feel writing this?
I think it's one of those things, just like the merge, just like Chapella. It feels like it's never going to happen, and then all of a sudden it's tomorrow kind of thing. It probably won't feel real until that button is pushed. I think Kane or whoever's doing the honors will probably be swinging a little bit at that point. But
right.
Yeah, it is an incredibly big deal for Rocket Pool, not just another upgrade. Yeah, it's under a week to go, 6 days, and between now and then, there's still a lot to happen. I have to go and.
Looks like we have Darren.
Oh yeah,
here now.
there we go. I'll see if we can get him up on stage.
Yeah, it's also very important to know, any node operators listening, that if you're in Docker mode, you must complete the upgrade before the Chapella hard fork. Based on whenmerge.com, there are only currently 20 hours remaining. So make sure you have upgraded to at least version 1.9. Darren, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
Yes. How is everyone?
Doing well, doing well. We were just talking about how exciting this is, the last bi-weekly update before Atlas.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's been a long time sort of coming. So I think Joe was saying we kind of started work on it like at least probably a year ago in total. So yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, Nick was saying it's almost like the thing you never expect to arrive, but that just suddenly it's here. But yeah, I was mentioning just a moment ago, if you are a node operator, make sure you are upgraded before the Chapella hard fork. 20 hours remain. Exciting times.
That's
version
right.
1.
Yeah, I was going to say, go on, you go.
I was just going to say that version 1.9.1 was also released as a low priority update, but just make sure you are on either 1.9 or 1.9.1. And if you are not on Docker mode, if you're on hybrid or native mode, you do have a little bit more time. You have until Atlas itself goes live on April 18th. So what has this run-up to Atlas been like? We saw the ODAP proposal go live, and how is that going?
Yeah, so the proposal goes up, and there's like a 7-day delay before the ODAO can actually start voting on that. So that's kind of just to make sure that there's decent visibility on what's being proposed, and then so basically we can't sneak anything in. So yesterday we made the contracts all verified. So now that you can kind of like see all the code and that sort of thing on EasyScan. So that's all done. And we've got like a little tool that verifies to make sure that the code matches the code that's verified on EtherScan is also the code that's in our GitHub repository for the that version. And so you can kind of run through and verify that yourself. And then we also switched over to Munifier, which we're just still in the process of kind of doing that, but switching over the Atlas source to now be included within our kind of bug bounty. So it was kind of like a big day yesterday to try and get that last bit sorted out. We had to wait, actually, so we couldn't do that on the day of proposing, all of that on the day of proposing, because we were just waiting for Sigma Prime to just finish off the last little bit in terms of that fix check. They did that yesterday, and so we could do all of that thing. The release itself is not completely locked down yet, so there's like a locking mechanism so that we can't change it. And at the moment we can change it, but we will lock that down as soon as the next reward period happens, because we have to include that reward interval number, the block that it gets included in the release. So we kind of can't. It's like this chicken and egg, so we have to kind of like do that
Right.
first. Yeah.
And so with the audits now largely complete and that done, the bug bounty, I believe, is 250,000 for a critical. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Awesome. So make sure if you are an auditor and you have some keen eyes to check out and make sure that we didn't miss anything. It's better that we pay 250K than it is that anything worse happens.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, get in there, have a look, and kind of do your worst.
And just a yeah, and as I mentioned, I think it's worth pointing out that the core team in the past has often paid out more than what the bounty itself has said, just as a token of appreciation towards well-constructed bug bounties. So in some ways, it might be just a minimum of 250K or a minimum of whatever the bounty size is. Beyond the Atlas preparation, me and Nick earlier were mentioning how the deposit pool increase was very quickly swallowed up. So the deposit pool was increased from 5K to 13K, and then within, I believe, 11 hours, that was filled up. So what was that like seeing from your perspective? All that demand suddenly come up.
I mean, it wasn't completely unexpected. We know that there is a fair amount of latent demand there. So yeah, so it wasn't completely unexpected. I think it kind of ramped up quickly up to like 8 or something like that, maybe 8 or 9, and then it held there for a little bit, and then it kind of got the rest of the way. Yeah, there was a kind of a few moments there where we thought, oh, maybe it's just we've just gotten to the. There's a little bit of not sure how it would go past the premium, disappearing. That was probably the thing.
Right.
Once the premium is gone, there's no ARB opportunity, and so then it's just pure demand. And I think the premium went something like, was it 8 or something? I'm not quite sure. But it went quite early, and then we just continued on. So
yeah, it was sort of like there were these two types of latent demand. This sort of actualized latent demand, which is the premium, and then this second hidden demand, the second latent demand, which is the people who are waiting on the sidelines for the premium to go to zero. And that former demand, the premium, was eaten up essentially instantaneously by arbitrage bots who minted roughly 7,000, 8,000 rETH, or brought something in that range. It brought it up to 11,000 in the deposit pool, and that was very quickly done based just on the premium. The rest of it was somewhat slower, but also partly the reason it was slower is that people had to realize that rETH was available, and there was very little marketing done, and yet we were still able to wake up a sleeping giant with that 4,500 ETH deposit. So it bodes well for Shanghai and Atlas when there will hopefully be much longer periods of time where rETH is available for minting.
Yeah, you kind of expect quite a few node operators to try to eat that deposit pool with their migrations or with new ADs mini pools. Do you expect that to go reasonably quickly? I would say, and then it's just a case of how then it's going to be really interesting to see how the demand and the supply kind of dynamics play out over time in terms of whether we fill up quickly or we sit with a few people in the queue and that sort of thing. I don't know. It's interesting to see that.
Yeah, I certainly will be sitting with popcorn, just waiting to see what happens. And I'm sure other members of the incentive management committee will also be sitting or watching very closely. I think the first rewards period, once we're through that, we'll have a much better idea of where the balance is. And we won't really know for sure until a couple of months out where the true balance is. But one thing that will definitely help on the demand side of things is the multi-chain expansion of rETH. So we are currently working on the ZK Sync one. Is that right? while the Arbitrum and Optimism ones are now complete?
Yeah, Optimism, Arbitrum, and Polygon actually are complete. And we're working on the ZK Sync one. The ZK Sync one is basically done. I think we just need to push it to mainnet now. And so we'll kind of work on that. There's a few little tidy up things we want to do before Atlas kind of goes out. So we want to try and get some of that part. Yeah, that's very, very close to kind of be finished. We also need to push out like a new ODAO release to actually get that firing. So that'll be in kind of like the next ODAO release probably.
Awesome. And do you want to touch on any of the other preparatory work that's being done to ensure that the protocol is ready for Atlas?
So it's more just behind the scenes stuff. So like updating telemetry and just making sure that we've got the stuff covered in terms of what we want to monitor post Atlas. A lot of it is just update because we've some of our contracts have changed and that sort of thing. Some of our internal like telemetry just needs updating, so that it kind of looks at the new contracts and the new different methods and that sort of thing. So it's just tidy up things like that is mainly it.
Awesome. The march to Atlas definitely is getting shorter and shorter. So in the world of integrations, things have been really ramped. Yep.
Oh, sorry. One thing we might say. So just in terms of the what happens next in terms of the release. So the ODAO are voting. Oh, sorry, the ODAO can't vote yet until next week. When we'll lock down the upgrade. Sorry, there's a plane going there. Well, I locked down the upgrade just after the RPL rewards submission, so that'll be kind of then locked down, and we won't be able to change it from then on, and that will be the release. Then next week, the voting will start, and that will happen very quickly. Like obviously, the ODAO have a few days to kind of look through what we've released over this last week, this week. But then the actual voting itself will actually be quite quick. So we'll the ODAO will then vote on the upgrade. That proposal, once it succeeds, we can kind of execute the vote. And all that really does is it just includes the upgrade contract within Rocketpool itself. And then the team will, at the time, which I think is 18th of, at midnight UTC, we'll be kind of then executing the upgrade. So what that actually does is it then applies those contract changes to the protocol. And so that at that point, Atlas is then live. I think we've got like an Atlas launch party thing going on there.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, will we have a live stream for that, Mav? Oh, sweet.
Yeah, our friends at ETH will be hosting us just like for Redstone.
Yeah, and then it's kind of it's popcorn time. So yeah, we'll kind of from then on. But that's how it will roll out.
I'm curious, as the team goes into the Chapella and Atlas upgrades, what are you guys going to be looking at as the events actually hit, as the block ticks over? With Chapella, things should be fairly smooth, assuming that protocol itself doesn't have an issue. So yeah, is there any difference for the team's perspective going into these two events?
There's not much. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah, awesome. So yeah, I mean, there's not much. As you said, Chapella is actually quite a simple release. Really, there's not a huge amount that we need to look out for. The only things we'll be looking out for is obviously the participation rate. That always kind of slightly dips. And then comes back up usually. So we'll be kind of monitoring for Chapella, be the participation rate, probably the withdrawal rate as well. I mean, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of exits going on, so there doesn't appear to be there'll be the partial withdrawals. So we'll be watching the partial withdrawals coming back, and just keeping an eye. There's not much to do in terms of watch it, but we'll kind of watch the partial withdrawals coming back. Maybe look at some of our mini pools just to make sure that they're actually getting the ETH that they are expecting. But that probably won't happen within the first few minutes. That's definitely going to be the next kind of like few hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours after Shapella, as the rewards kind of get processed. That's the partial withdrawals get processed. And then it's really just our people submitting exits, our people submitting full withdrawals, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the Shapella stuff. In terms of Atlas, it's really just kind of mini pool count, deposits for new mini pools. It's certainly just
the gas.
Gas. But so that'll be the kind of the things we'll be keeping an eye on.
Great. So it really seems like the team is ready for the coming events. Going to be fireworks from the viewing perspective. Moving into integrations, unless there's anything else you want to talk specifically about Atlas.
No, different integrations. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, there has been, again, another week where we've had just a huge torrent of integrations. Very likely, as our friends from Somalia have confirmed, in fact, on the back of the Chainlink Oracle. So, from the top, Arcadia Finance has enabled rETH on their protocol. Arcadia is a composable margin account platform where users can deposit into these smart contract margin accounts and then trade with leverage on approved products. So you can use Arcadia to leverage stake your rETH up to 6x. Arcadia, of course, this form of leverage, of course, has liquidation risks as well as significant smart contract risks. So make sure you do your due diligence if you are considering using Arcadia for leverage staking. Moving on from Arcadia, Teller Finance also has onboarded rETH into their protocol. Teller Finance is, one second. Sorry about that. Teller Finance allows users to borrow USDC against collateral. So you can use this in much the same way as a credit account, but instead of having an isolated margin, you can use this USDC for yield farming or for leverage. Teller version 2 currently is unaudited, so perhaps use a special caution if you are considering using their platform. But it's great to see all these varieties and flavors of leverage staking pop up. A different form of rETH integration that's popped up is a new ETH staking index token that utilizes rETH in the background. It has been very popular for users for different protocols that have these index tokens to use rETH, likely because of its good on-chain liquidity and very stable peg compared to the other LST tokens. Their blend of LSTs is currently based on both stETH and rETH. So this is an interesting one if you are looking for diversified exposure. What is the team's stance on sort of index staking tokens and how rETH fits into that world?
Yeah, I think indexes make a lot of sense. I don't think we have necessarily an opinion on it. I think it's kind of, again, it's one of those utility, it adds utility to rETH, which is always good. Me personally, I think the index tokens are a bit funny because you're diversifying in terms of the price, but you're kind of tying yourself to two risks.
Right.
So that would be my only thing. To just be, I think, be aware, or just do your research in terms of that stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, so index tokens definitely expand smart contract risk, but there are trade-offs involved. So make sure you do research before you decide what protocols you engage with. Speaking of index tokens, Reserve Protocol added support for rETH as a plugin to facilitate the creation of new index tokens. So if you wanted to create a token representation of, for example, 80% rETH, 20% RPL, Reserve Protocol might be what you want to look into.
And we're likely to get Reserve on one of these Twitter spaces. I was going to say later in the month, but I'm pretty sure we're almost booked out for this month. But at some point soon to discuss this technology in more detail.
Yeah, they are a complicated protocol, which definitely deserves a spot if they can find one. These Twitter spaces have turned into a hot commodity. Moving on into the integration world, this is a big one for the node operator side of things, and it's that DApp node has announced that they will be trying their best to support Atlas. It's not exactly clear what the timeline will be like for this, but they are strongly hinting that they will be ready to support this soon. So, what's the team stance on DApp node support? This is a huge opportunity for a new set of node operators, it feels like.
Yeah, so DAppNode and kind of Avado as well. Avado have been very good in terms of they've been supporting Rocket Pool for a long time now. And DAppNode and Avado are very important, mainly because so on the scale of kind of like node operators, there are some people who are fully comfortable with building and setting up their kind of own machine in terms of from scratch, essentially. And then there are other people who really just want some sort of an appliance they can kind of plug in and get going really quickly. And DAppNode and Avado fill that space. On the other end, you've kind of got like cloud services and platforms and that sort of thing that kind of abstract away even the machine part of it. But with DAppNode and Avado, it means that you can stake from home on an appliance, but still have that kind of like easier onboarding. And so they are very, very important because particularly as they promote home staking and make it a lot easier, they lower that barrier of entry, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and they also do lower the barrier of entry while maintaining the ability of increasing physical decentralization through hardware. So glad that they are working on getting 8 ETH LEBs integrated quickly. On the other side of things, as you mentioned, are the virtual. Or Nick, did you want to say something there?
Just to add in terms of timelines, we know that DAppNode it's been something that's been worked on for a little while now, and in terms of timelines, I think just unfortunate that they seem to be nearly ready, but then obviously with Atlas coming along, that changes things a little bit. So while we don't have a date to share at this time, we do know that the work is quite advanced already and should hopefully be not too much longer. I'd expect sometime after Atlas, but hopefully not too much longer to wait.
Sweet. Yeah, they tweeted that they were looking to make this process as safe as possible, but also fairly quick. So it definitely seems that they have been working on it for some time. As Darren mentioned, on the other end of these services are semi-centralized cloud services like Allnodes. While they are not as good for the ecosystem as running the nodes yourself from home or using Avado to stake at home or DAppNode to stake at home, these services do still provide greater access to staking and participation in the network to increase the overall network's economic defense budget. And notably, Allnodes has announced that they will support their own form of solo staker migration into LEB8 through Rocket Pool. So if you have a solo 32 ETH node, I'm not sure if you can convert from a physical to an all nodes, but if you're using all nodes to run a 32 ETH validator, you can then convert that into 4 LEB8s directly through all nodes if you have not changed your 0x00 credential, which is pretty cool. So this is something that the Rocket Pool protocol itself will also enable. So Darren, can you talk a little bit about our relationship with all nodes and then also solo staker migration in protocol? Darren, do we still have you?
Sorry, I can't hear Jasper.
Can you hear me, Langus?
I can hear you, yeah. I can't hear Jasper, though.
Did you hear my question or... Hello?
Okay, I think... Can you hear me, Jasper? I can always relay.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, let's do this.
And you can hear me?
I still can't hear you, Jasper.
That is so strange.
All right, so the question was, Langus, can you speak briefly about all nodes, our relationship with them?
Testing.
Oh dear. We did have this problem once before. Maybe we can continue, Jasper.
Yeah, that's fine. So as I was mentioning, Allnodes is a semi-centralized service provider. So they host their data infrastructure on a few data service centers, but they host all of it for you. So it is not as good for the ecosystem. However, they do enable more people to stake and are helpful to the ecosystem at large. Nick, do you have any opinions on Allnodes and our relationship with them?
I think you've summed it up pretty well, but also the fact that it can be and has been an interesting stepping stone for people, right? I feel like quite frequently we hear that once people have got their node online, they realize it maybe wasn't as difficult or as challenging or as much of a commitment as they initially thought, and that by perhaps offering a hosted service initially with a way to transfer across later, we can kind of increase the pie, so to speak. And it is good for Rocket Pool to have as many options as possible. I think we had a chat with all nodes recently. We may be due for another one, but they have been closely following the protocol and ensuring that they can support all our upgrades.
Definitely agree with the idea of all nodes being a stepping stone to full node operation. And staking is sort of a journey for years, and all nodes can be a journey of a few months out of that very long journey. So they certainly have a place in the ecosystem. It's interesting to note also that all nodes currently represents only about 11% of all mini pools. So in terms of their dominance, it's still very low. And so they are a decent choice if you are looking to stake. But the other part of that original question was around LEB8 solo staker migration. So if you are a solo staker and you have not set your withdrawal credentials yet, what is it that Rocket Pool enables for these people?
So Joe's done a lot of great work on what we're calling solo node operator migrations, and that greatly it helps to greatly simplify the process of converting your 32 ETH validator over to Rocket Pool mini pools. Obviously, as part of that, the return is increased. You will need some RPL to satisfy at least the minimum requirement, and you will be able to skip some of the queues, although at least right now it looks like there may not be much of a withdrawal queue. You never know going the other way though. So with all these unknowns, it's good that solo stakers who may have spun up one or more validators before Rocket Pool was live, that they do have this option to easily move across to Rocket Pool.
You know who reserves the right to withdraw? Who genuinely reserves it? people who launched with 5% commission validating for 5% commission nodes, or if not withdraw, just do a migration, which is awesome. They don't even have to exit. They can just migrate from 16 ETH directly to 8 ETH. So big kudos, big shout out to Joe and the team for enabling that to happen.
Okay.
Moving forward, though,
we're going to try and get Langers back on, but yeah, let's continue on for now.
Yeah. Last on our list of integrations is Parallel Protocol. Parallel Protocol is interesting in that they are an over-collateralized Euro stablecoin. So there are not too many stablecoins pegged to the Euro, so having Parallel on board rETH is pretty cool because we do serve a reasonably sized Euro population. We even have our second community call at a more Euro-friendly time to accommodate these members. So if you are looking for some Euro exposure while still maintaining your rETH stack, check out Parallel Protocol.
I think crypto has done a lot to kind of spread the US dollar around the world, but at the end of the day, it may be interesting to some people to have assets in their local currency, especially when you talk about IRL commitments and bills and debt and the likes. On that point, we've got Langers back up. Can you hear us now, or assuming if he stays on?
Yeah. All good.
There we go.
Yep.
All right. That's great.
Sweet. So Nick gave a pretty good summary of the answer I was trying to ask you earlier, but any comments briefly on our relationship with all nodes?
Yeah. So no, it's a really good relationship. They are kind of working very closely with us in terms of supporting Atlas, and yeah. So I think, as I said before, it's kind of like a double-edged sword for us because we feel that home staking is definitely the kind of the strongest thing you can do for Ethereum. But also we're kind of very aware that people travel, so they can't always have something at their home. Maybe they need some extra support to kind of to actually run the node, and so so it might be internet or it might be electricity, whatever it kind of is. That's kind of the issue, that they can't actually do it from home. And so all nodes does provide a way accessibility for that. So that's good. There is actually also a migration path. So if you want to start with all nodes, and you can actually migrate onto your own kind of home staking kit when it's available for you to do that. So there is that option as well, which we've worked with them on.
Yeah, that's a very popular route, honestly, and one I encourage for people who are scared of the task of running a node or think that is too daunting. There is a slower route into easing yourself in. But yeah, moving forward now, the world of governance has been quite busy. Coinbase Ventures was officially voted onto the Oracle DAO. So that went through the proper procedure. That proposal was on for a week and then voted on. Any comments there? But
yeah, I mean, we've got a few new ODL members kind of recently in recent times. So it's really good. It's great to have Coinbase or Coinbase Ventures and Unit 410 kind of as a collaboration kind of coming on board. That's fantastic. They're kind of in the ODL stuff now, and Gitcoin obviously quite recently as well. So so it's really good to have those members on board.
That brings the total now, I believe, to 18 members, as the Gitcoin and Coinbase are the two pending, but are now fully fledged. Any timeline on future members, or has Atlas sort of absorbed all the attention for the time being? Hello? Testing?
I can hear you. Maybe Langers is...
Yeah.
You can't hear Jesper.
Can you hear? No, I can't hear Jesper.
Oh,
Yeah, but essentially, to answer that question, yeah, Atlas is kind of absorbed all headspace in terms of that at the moment. We'll kind of come back to it. I think one of the big things that we want to kind of do is put this ODAO constitution in place when that's being kind of developed at the moment, so that we can kind of see how it plays out. So we'll get that kind of done first, and then we'll be on probably a much better footing to introduce new ODAO members and that sort of thing.
Sweet. In terms of the IMC, we launched a rETH Uniswap v3 position. This is a full range position with rETH to prevent against Oracle manipulation. So there's a attack vector on Uniswap v3 where if someone is borrowing rETH against ETH, or if they're able to borrow against rETH in a leverage or a money market, they can attack the Uniswap v3 Oracle by bringing it where there is no liquidity and then cheaply keeping the price there. So what the IMC did is launch this full range pool so that it becomes much more expensive for the attacker to maintain said attack. The IMC has also posted on the forum looking to expand the charter to include RPL, rETH, or RPL in the Oracle defense. So exciting stuff to make rETH a more resilient token in all forms. I see Darren is trying to rejoin. But yeah, the IMC has put, I believe, about 10 ETH towards this pool, which is not much, but it is enough to prevent some oracles. We are also actively debating whether we want to increase our total protocol-owned liquidity position. On the topic of the IMC, the election period has just ended, and the new IMC is currently being onboarded and getting geared up for the position. This includes getting addresses added to the multi-sig, which executes transactions, as well as getting up to speed on sort of what's going on behind the scenes. The people that were not selected for the IMC are still relevant, as they will be around for potential backup members in case anyone has to drop the committee during their period for whatever reason. Our final committee is going to be made out of myself, Valdor, Langers, Nashua, who is a new member, Uisk, Romana, who is a new member, Denim, non-fungible Yokem, who I believe is a new member, Phils.eth, and that rounds out the group. So it is a highly qualified group, and I'm excited to see what we all do together. The other major committee is the GMC, the Grants and Bounties Management Committee. And they have also opened up the second round of grants, bounties, and retrospective awards. So if you are looking to contribute to the protocol or get recognized for some work you did, or you think that there's something that should exist in the protocol, now is the time to act. Check out the forum where you can find templates to create your own bounty, grant, or retrospective reward. The timeline is getting tight. It closes on April 15th. And these periods are only a few times a year, so it is ideal to get your request in as soon as you can. Have you been following along on the forum to seeing the cool things that have been proposed? Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering if Langers was online or not. Yeah, I saw there was a bit of activity, and I've also personally been talking to a few people who've kind of reached out. And while I'm not on the GMC, I've been kind of directing them to the right location. So I think there's still a few more submissions still to come through. Various people or projects who have an idea of something that can be built for Rocket Pool. Exciting to see how their proposals might take shape and whether the GMC finds them worthy of contribution or not. There's certainly been a ton of great examples of work done by members of the community to support Rocket Pool. Some assets that we use every day. So doing the GMC is really doing some great work here.
Yeah, I totally echo that, and I'm really excited to see the financing of some of those research pieces. Uh, I know Nashua's pieces on the ODAO has already started to come to fruition and has produced some really great data that can be used by the PDAO, ODAO, and team moving forward. So Ken in particular with his proposals is going to be pretty exciting. So moving on into media and marketing, there has been a ton of coverage on the protocol this week, this past fortnight. The SWIs. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And as usual, we can't really capture every mention of Rocket Pool out there. It's got back to the point again where, every day there's something new as Chapella approaches liquid staking. Once again becomes very relevant and very topical. And there's a ton of examples listed in the biweekly of everything from media pieces to videos. The first item that we have there is from Swiss One Capital. So they put out kind of a high-level report on the state of the industry, and as part of that, they mentioned Rocket Pool. So that was cool to see us featured there. And sorry, Jessica, I think you were going to ask me something.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, how do you think the RP intern has been holding up? It feels I'm worried about their health, having to find so many articles to retweet every day at this point.
Oh yeah, it's a 24/7 job, I bet. But at least it's good to see them here in the audience for once instead of slacking off.
Oh, there it is. There's that little lassie. If you're not familiar, the Rocket Pool Intern is a lovely Twitter account run by a lassie locked in the basement that posts and retweets tons of Rocket Pool content. And it's probably the best source of staying up to date on integrations of the protocol as they happen live.
Yeah, it's either probably a great account to follow that will fill up your feed with Rocket Pool content, or an annoying account to follow which will clog up your feed with Rocket Pool content, depending on which way you view that and how that algorithm behaves. But certainly, you probably won't miss much in the world of Rocket Pool, that's for sure.
Yeah, some of those things, including articles from CoinDesk, CoinEdition, CoinGecko, Decrypt, and the list goes on. Moving forward, recent community calls and Twitter spaces have been pretty awesome. They included my last one, which was with Crypto Tax Calculator. And then since then, there has been one with ETH Staker and Teller Finance. Although I believe the Teller Finance one was the one where Teller didn't actually show up, and it was just Ken.
Yeah, we ended up. They ended up hosting me. I think it was a couple of days later. It was in the middle of the long weekend, Saturday for me. I think it might have been the Easter Friday for a lot of people. But we did have a good chat, and there is a recording available on their Twitter account. And then, yeah, for ETH Staker, that was somewhat similar in that it was a community call, but their community call where they got us on to talk about Atlas, which was a great call, and that is available on YouTube, I believe. That was a live stream with them.
Sweet. We've also had some pretty good video coverage. Altcoin Daily is a pretty big channel, and they put out a video talking about Rocket Pool. And then there was also a community member who I really want to shout out, Leigh McDonald. They have put out, their channel has some really great videos everything from setting up a rocket pool node to a mini pool bond reduction on Atlas to how to exit if you wanted to take your ETH out. If you're looking to learn about the process, these are some of the best educational tools out there. So again, just huge shout out to Leigh McDonald. You can find their content at Leigh McDonald1. That is their Twitter handle.
Yeah, that's a little bit further down in the bi-weekly, but as you point out, great video content all around, and yeah, those guides especially useful. I've seen them being utilized on Twitter and Discord, I believe, as examples when people are asking questions. Obviously, the Rocket Ball documentation is pretty good, but some people may find it easier to watch a 5-minute video rather than read through lines of documentation. So to have options there.
Yeah, visual learners certainly will find these videos helpful. So Lunar Crush is a metrics tracking site that recently gave RPL a pretty high engagement score. This is not the first time Rocket Pool has achieved this. I believe the last time was right around the merge. So it's pretty indicative of where the eyes are around these big Ethereum events.
Exactly. And what Lunar Crush does is attempts to screen out a lot of the spam content that can exist in terms of people latching on to trending topics.
Your mic just sort of got covered.
Hopefully that's better. But yeah, they try and screen out a lot of spam content. Some accounts can latch on to whatever's trending, and it's not really meaningful coverage. But obviously, all of these videos, all of these media pieces, and all of the Twitter threads and mentions that aren't included in the bi-weekly all kind of add up to providing this really high score. From memory, it was around 5th or 6th place out of all of the essentially all the tokens that they track, all the major ones. So a pretty good showing for Rocket Pool there.
Next up, we have some cool incentivization programs going on. Nouns DAO is an NFT-based DAO that recently launched a program to incentivize solo stakers, including Rocket Pool node operators. To participate, you have to modify your graffiti to, I believe, include a pair of sunglasses. It is a you have to include Lodestar and, yes, sunglasses as the art. So if you are interested, if you manage to propose a block with that as your graffiti, you will be eligible for a reward. So definitely check out Nouns DAO for their program. And similar to this program, Lodestar is incentivizing users to switch to their client in a similar manner. If you propose a block with Lodestar in your graffiti, you will earn potentially some rewards. I apologize earlier. I mentioned Lodestar and the sunglasses together. For Nouns DAO, you just need the sunglasses. For Lodestar, you just need Lodestar in the graffiti. Lodestar was working, I believe, with the team so that the graffiti would have enough space, because Rocket Pool itself requires some graffiti in the base case. So these are some pretty cool incentivization programs directed at solo stakers. And do you think we'll see more of these in the future?
I think quite possibly. I think a lot of people are expecting staking as a whole to grow and to become much more important and relevant. So I wouldn't be surprised. Of course, for the likes of Nounstar especially, it's potentially a little bit of a guerrilla marketing campaign. So interesting to see that side of things evolve.
Yeah, it certainly is guerrilla marketing, but it's sort of like this positive sum guerrilla marketing where we're pretty happy with the outcome.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Langers was recently interviewed by Staking Rewards, and the recording of this is available on YouTube. They talk about how Rocket Pool fares in competition with Lido and Coinbase, as well as preparations for Atlas.
And there may be one or two more interviews that Langens is giving. We were just trying to coordinate some times earlier today, other than what is currently listed in the event section of Discord, of course. But yeah, just goes to show how much interest there is around liquid staking these days. And then I think the last point we have is Block Native put out what I believe is a pretty exceptional document, very well researched overview of liquid staking. The medium suggested read time, I think, is over half an hour. So a lot of details in there. As I said, very well put together piece. Not only in terms of its coverage of Rocket Pool, of course, but the industry as a whole. So I think it would be a perfect, maybe not a first introduction, but certainly for someone who wanted to really learn about staking. It's definitely more than just Rocket Pool, but it was great to see the protocol mentioned in there.
Right, it is definitely a great write-up. However, I just want to point out one mistake really quickly if anyone's listening. They note that Rocket Pool does not currently have plans for a direct mechanism to exchange rETH to ETH and plans for withdrawals. I just want listeners to know that's false. You can already exchange and unstake your rETH for ETH in the deposit pool, and this has been available since the protocol went live. So liquid stakers will have already been able to exit. Withdrawals will simply make it so that node operators now have the ability to exit. But otherwise, tremendous piece. So, in summary of today's call, we started today with guest speakers from Sommelier Finance and their associated strategists from 7Cs and Define Logic Labs. We talked about how Sommelier was planning to integrate rETH in their real yield ETH vault, which is a sophisticated Cosmos-based off-chain compute strategy platform for Uniswap v3 and leverage staking of ETH. This platform or this vault promises to have some fairly sustainable yielding assets. However, this is DeFi. There are risks involved. So make sure you do your research if you plan on using Sommelier. In the second half of this call, we talked with Darren mostly about the bi-weekly update and the fact that this is the final bi-weekly before Atlas goes live. At time of speaking, there is just about 20 hours remaining until the Shapella upgrade goes live. So if you are a node operator and you are in Docker mode, you must be upgraded to version 1.9 or version 1.9.1 before that happens. We then talked about the minor details going on in the background that the team is doing in the preparation for Atlas, such as things like telemetry and making the making the ImmuneFi contracts available. The ZK Sync provider is nearly ready to go live, and so exciting cross-chain stuff is happening. Oh, a point we accidentally missed is that website redesign is still ongoing. Curious to see how that pans out. Integrations was very hot this week on the back of the Chainlink Oracle. Arcadia Finance added rETH as collateral in their margin account. Teller Finance has added rETH to use as collateral to borrow USDC. Two different index platforms have enabled rETH, including Stake.link and Reserve Protocol. Dapnode, the popular hardware staking company, announced that they will be supporting 8 ETH LEBs very soon. Previously, Dapnode did not support Rocket Pool. So this is going to be a huge new node operator raise. and new way to enable staking. All nodes announced that they will have solo migration enabled for their platform as well. So if you are a solo staker, you have a couple of options. You can migrate into all nodes, or you can migrate into more LEBs. Lastly, in integrations, Parallel Protocol voted to onboard rETH for their over-collateralized Euro stablecoin. That's a cool one. Governance also hot this fortnight. Coinbase was officially voted onto the ODAO, filling out the last pending ODAO member. The IMC launched a full-range rETH ETH Uniswap v3 position to bolster the Oracle. The IMC elections ended, and the new committee has been chosen, and onboarding processes are ongoing. The GMC round is closing on April 15th. If you have a bounty, grant, or retrospective reward that you are interested in, you have to act before the 15th. Media marketing, always a hit. Tons of articles and videos talking about how Rocket Pool is positioned going into Shanghai. We've had a variety of community calls recently, including with Teller Finance, ETH Staker, and Crypto Tax Calculator. Nouns DAO, and Lodestar both announced programs incentivizing solo staking based on graffiti. So check that out if you want to earn some bonus rewards. Langers was interviewed by Staking Rewards, and there are talks of even more interviews in the near future. A big shout out to Leigh McDonald on their videos about converting from a 16 ETH pool to 2 LEB8s post Atlas. These are great guides for really visualizing how simple the process is. And lastly, Block Native put together a very comprehensive guide on this staking ecosystem. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure chatting.
Yeah, definitely one of the calls of all time, I think. And
it was certainly a pack.
Certainly the next time we'll be on with you as a host, Jasper, will be well through Atlas and Chapella. But it's exciting times, and looking forward to seeing everyone on the various upcoming calls that we have. Seems like almost one a day for the next few days. There's lots to be excited about, and thanks for joining us on this call.